All right. Greetings, fellow Armchair Imagineers. Tiki here, and welcome to a rather impromptu solo stream. Kind of a rare one, but you know what? I might be doing them more in the future because honestly, I feel like my content is kind of running a little dry working with other people. I feel like maybe if I expanded my territory to do more solo stuff instead of relying on the whims of other people's schedules, things might go a little bit smoother. This week is going to be a little bit light on content for the channel. Just so y'all know, I'm kind of in a transitioning point with the channel right now, just as far as trust me, September, October, all the way probably through the end of the year is going to be pretty busy. I am currently watching through each and every Disney Toons sequel to prepare for the great Disney Toons ranking podcast that has been teased for like so long on the channel, but it is coming. We are also going to be doing a surprise second ranking, one coming a little bit before the great Disney Toon rankings, with Eli of Little Blue Productions, who joined me this week on the Catwoman retrospective. Eli and I are going to be covering our Tim Burton film rankings. That's going to be 19 films before Beetlejuice comes out. And that's going to be very fun, kind of going through the highs and lows of a very divisive filmmaker. So what I wanted to do now, we're also in a transitioning point with Batcave because I've got to read something like 20 issues, 20 comic book issues, in order to complete the comic storyline for Batcave Begins. That I need to. I basically have a comic that I need to read for Batman Begins. And then we got one more episode, and that's it. So, yeah, a lot of transitioning stuff. And for that reason, because I'm kind of knee deep in research, there's not going to be a lot of stuff on the main channel this week. Of course, you can look forward to the Phineas and Ferb Recapinator with Jacob and Dragon Friday, as always. Other than that, I think it's going to be pretty light. So I wanted to put something out. Just to kind of let you guys know that it's going to be kind of light this week. And B, because with the Sorcerer's Apprentice game, I've been having a hard time. Jokers and we recapped, I believe, the first two, I think maybe three projects a few weeks ago. And honestly, like I was kind of alluding to at the beginning of the stream here, I kind of feel like the Sorcerer's Apprentice podcast, that it's hard to not have the perspective of other teams. It's hard to kind of like go over all these projects that have such a hand, like so many people have a hand in these projects. So because of that, I'm just going to kind of tackle the most recent Sorcerer's Apprentice project, but do it through my lens. I'm not going to be talking about the other teams. If you want to follow along, I've got a link in the description of this video that's going to show you this game that my team and I came up with. Essentially, the prompt here at the Sorcerer's Apprentice Armchair Imagineering game, I believe this was oh god, I need to what prompt was it? Hold on, sorry guys. I believe it was prompt 6. Okay, prompt 6. We were tasked with creating a Smash Brothers clone using theme park characters. So what my team came up with, me specifically, I had the idea of essentially combining Smash Brothers with the tag team mechanics of Marvel vs. Capcom, using Disney and Universal as kind of the two companies in that equation. And I think we came up with a pretty interesting roster. Kind of like a nice little collection that features both obscure, deep cut characters as well as very memorable, very top tier A-listers, kind of an interesting mix, especially on the Universal end, an interesting mix of characters created specifically for the parks versus characters that, while not created specifically for the parks, very much represent the parks. And so with that in mind, let's just go ahead and go over this from top to bottom. We will start at the top here with Mr. Six. Now, Mr. Six, the idea with him is that he is the unlockable character. He is the mysterious 41st character in this game. And he's the only character that does not have a specific Disney or Universal class. If you pick a Disney or Universal character, that character can only use items related to Disney or Universal. There's kind of a strategy there. Do you like the items that are in one company better than the other companies? Do you want to have both items? When you tag team out, when you swap out characters, so say, for example, you're using a Universal character, then you swap to a Disney character, then instead of getting Universal items, you'll swap to get Disney items. So there's a level of strategy involved there. Mr. Six throws that all out the window. You're getting all the items when you play as Mr. Six. That's a big benefit of him. His moveset mostly revolves around, of course, dancing, also kind of like riding roller coasters. You know, you can have a special that'll jam a roller coaster car right into your opponent with Mr. Six riding it. Very fun character, very interesting inclusion. Like I said, I like the idea of, in this game that's very Disney Universal, having like one character who's sort of above all that. All right, so now we are going to go through, I'm going to start on the left, start with the Disney characters, and then we will go to the Universal characters. I'm not really going to explain the movesets here. I'm more so going to just kind of get into the reasoning for why all these characters were picked. So we, starting from the top left on the Disney side, we have Sunny Eclipse, everyone's favorite alien lounge club act. I think Sunny Eclipse is a very easy pick for a game like this, because when looking at original theme park characters, he's one where he's more of a deep cut for sure, but he's definitely like the people that do know him, the people that are in the know about Sunny Eclipse. He's a very beloved character in that space. I know a lot of people that strongly feel that if Sunny Eclipse were to go away, if they were to take him out of the Cosmic Rays Starlight Cafe at the Magic Kingdom, it would kind of be a little bit of a death knell for the Magic Kingdom. Like, he's kind of a pivotal part of the Magic Kingdom experience for a lot of folks. So, yeah, I think Sunny Eclipse is definitely an easy inclusion there. So now we have Captain EO. Honestly, this wouldn't have been my first pick to include in the final roster, but working with my team, a lot of people did want him. I think it's just a little bit dicey with the Michael Jackson thing, but then again, Captain EO, I wouldn't say he's like an A-lister, like someone like a Figment or some of the Haunted Mansion characters we're going to get into, but I would say, as far as like iconic theme park characters, he's easily in the B category. He's definitely not as obscure as someone like Sunny Eclipse, but he is on the older side of things. But the big thing is that if you grew up with him, if you did experience Captain EO back when the show was new, it's a really memorable, groundbreaking experience in that extent. Obviously kind of proved some new ground as far as the 3D immersive theater shows go, which is still a genre that's kind of like evolving to this day in the theme parkscape. So Captain EO only made sense. Next, we have Henry from the Country Bear Jamboree. The Country Bears, we didn't really quite know what to do with them. I actually kind of think this slot really should be just generic Country Bear, and then have different Country Bears kind of in different costume slots. So, for example, you can like play as Henry, or play as Big Al or Trixie. I think that would probably work better for a Country Bear slot. But Country Bears, again, it just makes a lot of sense as far as they are a super memorable inclusion in the Disney canon. And while the Enchanted Tiki Birds are going to be represented through an item in the game, because I just couldn't think of a way to include them as far as like the moveset and everything. I think the Country Bears make a lot of sense as like representing the animatronic shows of Disney. All right, next up, moving right along in this roster, we have Disco Yeti. This is definitely not the regular Yeti. This is very much going to play on the pun of the Disco Yeti thing from Expedition Everest, which is one of those things I don't think Disney themselves would probably acknowledge the Disco Yeti of it all. But I think it would be a lot of fun. It would definitely differentiate him from other characters. I have Harold from the Matterhorn as kind of an event item in this game. So Disco Yeti is kind of like the stand-in for Harold as far as like being the Yeti character from a big Disney mountain. I think it makes a lot of sense for him to be here. I think you can do a lot of fun things with his move set to both include kind of like big brawler moves, slashing with his claws and whatnot, as well as just kind of like flashy dance moves. I think you can have a lot of fun with the various costumes. So yeah. Figment, pretty obvious. You can't really do a Disney Universal Smash game without Figment. I think Figment, out of all the characters on this entire roster, probably the biggest lock. Just makes a lot of sense. I don't really feel like I need to get into it. We did have some debate on whether or not we wanted to include Dreamfinder in the mix, if we wanted to have Dreamfinder as a separate character, or if we wanted to have like a Figment Dreamfinder combination slot. Ultimately, we decided that Figment as a character had just a lot of versatility as far as the moveset. He can fly, he can traverse. You can do a lot of stuff with the imagination gimmick for his moveset. So Dreamfinder just wasn't really needed here. All right, next up, we're getting into some iconic Haunted Mansion characters. We have the Hatbox Ghost. No real need to go into detail about why Hattie is here. He's probably the most famous of the Haunted Mansion ghosts as far as just the actual lore behind him. His moveset would be a little bit tricky. I think out of the 3 Haunted Mansion characters that we have, his moveset's a little bit the most up in the air, but you got to include him. I mean, he's just a legendary presence. And obviously, Disney very much propped him up through the movie as well, having him be the main antagonist of the new Haunted Mansion movie. Very clearly a big seminal character in the Disney mythology. Next up, we have the Bride, Constance Hatchaway. And again, a very prominent Haunted Mansion character, the main antagonist of the Muppet Haunted Mansion. Which I think is still easily the best Haunted Mansion movie, just for the record. Yeah, The Bride makes a lot of sense for me. I think Constance has a lot of interesting lore behind her. You can obviously have the axe as like the main weapon. She'd very much be kind of like a mid-range melee type of character, but also could do some interesting things with the actual ghost stuff, maybe evaporating through walls and whatever. So The Bride, definitely an easy inclusion here. Another easy inclusion is Captain Red from Pirates of the Caribbean. This ended up being our single Pirates of the Caribbean inclusion, and Pirates of the Caribbean is very interesting because, of course, the movies kind of overshadowed it, and also with Pirates, you don't really have a lot of named characters. We considered putting in the Auctioneer. The Auctioneer is probably, like, out of the characters in Pirates, he's probably the most prominently well-known. But I don't know, like, with his scene in the state that it's in currently, I just don't know if it was a good call to include him. But Red made a lot of sense. And with these picks, we were kind of striving for female inclusion as well. I don't think we had, like, a a perfect 50-50 split of male and female characters, but I definitely think we try to get as close to that as we could. So Red is mostly like, as much as she is famous, like the whole thing of she was auctioned off at the auction, and then, you see her portrait in the Dead Man's Grotto, and she's like with the pirates. She's very much part of the crew, probably a captain in her own right. Very interesting mythology with her. I think it's pretty fair to say that at this point, if they ever do get around to making another Pirates of the Caribbean movie, it would at least be a fair guess to say that she would probably be a big inclusion in it. So, yeah, I think for the Pirates of the Caribbean rep, what you do have to have here, I think Red makes a lot of sense. Next up is a bit of a deep cut, but he's just too fun to not include. We have the Ice Gator, the mascot of Blizzard Beach. And honestly, realistically, I do think Ice Gator would make the cut in a lineup like this. I just think that he just makes a lot of sense as a mascot, as a platform fighter. I think you can do a lot of fun things with his moveset, with the skis and everything. His design is very appealing. I think he could compete with Figment as far as like the cartoon character of the group, of the Disney group. Makes sense for me. Okay, next up we have Skipper and OB, Orange Bird. This one, this was a little bit tricky because, like Jungle Cruise, we definitely wanted to have some sort of representation. But obviously, there's not a lot of named characters in Jungle Cruise. Certainly, we didn't want to have Trader Sam be the representation. That would be a little bit on the problematic side. So we just decided to go with generic Skipper. I imagine it would be like you could be a male or female Skipper. I think that would be an easy costume swap. Orange Bird would probably provide a lot of the actual moveset here. And Orange Bird, I think, is probably the more iconic of the two as far as just theme park rep that you need to have. I think Orange Bird is probably up there with Figment as far as like just being a lock. So I think it makes sense to combine the two. Both are big icons of Adventureland. I don't think Orange Bird, just from a physical perspective, is a big enough character to include on his own. I think he'd be too small, so that's why I think it makes sense to pair him up with the Skipper. All right, next up we have Madame Leota. And Madame Leota is an interesting character because I feel like she's a lock to be included. I think she's up there with like Figment and Orange Bird is like just a pivotal cornerstone of Disney park characters. Very memorable. The moveset for Leota would be interesting. Definitely, while I think Hatbox Ghost is more of a blank slate than she is, I definitely think this would require the most creativity as far as the moveset goes. I am picturing the instruments that she has kind of playing a big role here. The instruments kind of floating around, kind of being used as the weapons. Obviously, the actual head, the actual like crystal ball wouldn't really be that big as far as the actual combat goes. All right, I'm going to crack out Mickey, Yensid, and Maleficent all in one go. So these three we decided to include just because the story mode focuses on stuff that takes place within the lore of the Sorcerer's Apprentice game, the Armchair Imagineering game that this whole project is hosted on. It's got a whole continuing storyline. These three characters are very prominent within the storyline. Essentially, the basic idea behind the storyline is it's kind of like a Kingdom Hearts, Kingdom Keepers style crossover event, but it's also got a lot of humor, kind of leans into the meme side of Disney park fandom a little bit. You'd really have to be involved with the game to kind of understand what I'm talking about here. So these three slots, I wouldn't necessarily be my first pick, but with the team I was working with, a lot of them were working on the story mode, and they figured these three characters pretty much had to be included. I will say Mickey and Maleficent, you can argue with the phantasmic of it all. Yensid, if it were up to me, I would probably swap him out with someone else, but he is important to the actual story mode of the game, so that's why he's here. Let's see, moving on, we have Mystic and Albert. And honestly, I do think that there were probably other international characters that we could have included. Mystic and Albert, I feel like out of all the characters in C, in the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, these two were the easiest because you've got Albert the monkey as kind of like your sort of cartoon mascot in the group. Because I feel like the tricky thing with the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, as far as like a game like this goes, is that by all intents and purposes, like, they're just kind of guys. You know what I mean? Like, they're just kind of regular people for the most part that just happen to be involved with exploring and adventuring, and I don't necessarily know if their moveset would be all that great for the most part for most of them. C is definitely a very important tool in crafting storylines for Disney parks. I don't know if Disney's going to use them much anymore, given the current state, given the D23 of it all, the IP-ification of Disney parks. But, back when Disney was trying to kind of like tie the Disney parks into its own sort of like extended universe, C was very prominent in that regard. So, Mystic and Albert definitely are the C representation here, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Next up, we have Sinbad and Chandu. These are the two main characters, of course, from the Sinbad boat ride at Tokyo Disney Sea. I don't have a lot to say about this because I have never been on the ride, but I do know it's one of the big, most prominent rides at Disney Sea. Of course, Sinbad did not originate with Disney parks, but I think with Disney Sea being the most well-regarded and critically acclaimed Disney park in the world, Sinbad is essentially the Disney Sea rep in this roster. So by that extent, I think it makes sense. Wayne Szalinski is probably the biggest wild card, at least on the Disney front. And we definitely have like an equivalent of him in the Universal front. Wayne Szalinski's whole gimmick would basically be kind of like shrinking down to tiny size and being a very defensive character. Joker's was very much the champion for Wayne Szalinski, so I will give Joker's credit for him making the final roster. I do think that if you're talking like the Imagination Institute, that era of Disney parks, for better or for worse, Wayne Szalinski does make sense. I think he's definitely a better person to put on the roster than a Nigel Channing. So I do think that Szalinski does represent maybe not the best era of Tomorrowland and Epcot, but certainly an era of those parks. All right, next up we have the Phantom from Phantom Manor. I don't have a ton to say about this guy. I don't necessarily, like, this is one of the characters I don't know if I would have included on the roster just because we already have 3 Haunted Mansion reps already, but I guess the big important thing with the Phantom is just having a rep from Disneyland Paris. That makes sense that we'd want to have something in that regard. So there we go. We have the Phantom. Next up, we have Captain Rex. I think Captain Rex is another big lock. I don't necessarily think you can do a game like this without Star Wars, being as though Galaxy's Edge is like just a big kind of prominent part of the Disney parks right now. But that being said, Galaxy's Edge does not have a lot of original characters in its roster. I think maybe the closest is probably like Lieutenant Beck. And I love me some Lieutenant Beck, but I don't really imagine Lieutenant Beck would have that great of a move set. So, Captain Rex, essentially, if you played Smash and you've played as Rob the Robot from Smash, that would be Captain Rex. Again, I think Captain Rex is a pivotal character, not just for Disney parks, but just for theme parks in general. I think he's actually kind of it's kind of underreported just how much of a cosmic shift he had. Because with Captain Rex, you really get into the groundwork of the whole "and then something goes wrong" trope of theme parks from the 80s and 90s. That was like a big thing for theme park design, and Captain Rex was kind of a trailblazer in that regard. All right, and finally we have Waldo C. Graphic. This project was made it was completed and put together mere days before the D23 Expo. So Waldo C. Graphic being on this list is even more kind of it's more of a prominent slot than it might even be otherwise, considering Muppet Vision is perhaps on the chopping block. I think that Waldo C. Graphic makes a lot of sense as far as being a Muppet Vision rep. Muppet Vision is just a very important attraction in Disney history, as far as the kind of, it's an evolution of Captain EO, as far as whereas Captain EO definitely had like fog and lasers and stuff, Muppet Vision took that a step further with in-theater animatronics and performers and effects. Very prominent, of course. It's the last Muppet related thing that Jim Henson had a close hand in. So yeah, Waldo C. Graphic, definitely more on the obscure side, definitely a bit of a deep cut, but I think he earns his spot regardless. All right, next up we have the Universal side of things, and this is definitely going to be a lot more divisive. This was a lot harder to do. Realistically, we probably could have filled up like half these slots with Halloween Horror Nights icons, but we wanted to try and get a little bit more creative. With Universal, we gave ourselves a little bit more leeway as far as picking characters that weren't originally developed for the parks. We wanted to just really make sure that we had a lot of rep from the most iconic areas of the Universal parks. So with that in mind, let's go through the roster here. We have Lord Darkanon. Right off the bat, probably one of the less likely picks if something like this were to ever happen. Lord Darkanon is the villain from Poseidon's Fury, a very, very cheesy, almost Power Rangers level bad guy. Kind of dwells in that sort of Greek mythology mold when it comes to power set. Again, I definitely don't think that he's definitely a deep cut, but I feel like he has a place on this roster just because he is memorably silly. And the Lost Continent is going away, so I feel like having him on this roster would almost kind of like preserve it in some way. All right, next up we have the man, the myth, the legend himself, hashtag Botanicus, from the E.T. adventure. I have no idea what the fuck his moveset would be, but I feel like Botanicus, as far as like original characters developed for a theme park from the Universal side of things, you need him. You absolutely need him. So definitely one of the big locks from Universal. All right, we have Earl the Squirrel. I'm going to do Earl the Squirrel and Little Boo together because, honestly, I don't really know a lot about either of them. I know that they're kind of the icons of Halloween and Christmas, respectively. They're kind of hidden throughout the parks during Halloween Horror Nights and the Christmas season. And I think both of them make a lot of sense on the roster just because they are, again, original creations for the park. Very much mascot characters in their own right. I think personally they're a little bit like size-wise, they're a little bit small to work in a platform fighter like this, but I still feel like they were kind of locks just because of how original they are. All right, next up we have Victoria Frankenstein, of course, the one of the lead characters from Universal's Dark Universe, the monster-based land in Epic Universe. And I think Victoria Frankenstein is a lock. I think you can do a lot of interesting stuff with her. She's pretty much an original theme park character in her own right. Definitely one of the big Epic Universe. I'm pretty sure she is the main Epic Universe representation here on this lineup. So she might be the biggest lock out of anyone here, probably. So yeah, definitely needed to include her. Jack the Clown, probably the biggest, most popular Halloween Horror Nights icon. Makes a lot of sense for him to be here. It wouldn't make sense to do something like this without him. Again, I feel like you could easily fill up most, if not all, of the Universal roster just with HHN icons. We kind of resisted the temptation to do that, but we had to bring in some of the heavy hitters. I don't think it gets any heavier than Jack, so that's why he's here. Blue, the Velociraptor, is a character that I personally advocated for here, and I'm glad I did. I think it makes a lot of sense to have a Jurassic representation. I don't really think you can do something from Universal without having at least one Jurassic Park character. And Blue, I feel like, checks a lot of boxes. Female rep for one, which again it's a little bit on the trickier side here. So Blue is technically a female, so I think that does check off a box there. I think just Blue would essentially be kind of like a combination of like Sonic the Hedgehog as far as speed goes, but then also just have a literal bite to her as far as the moveset goes. Velocicoaster is a crown jewel of Islands of Adventure. So I just think Blue is, for me, she's a lock. I think I was one of the only people on the team that was like really dedicated to keeping Blue in the roster, but I'm glad that we did. I think she's one of the more logical choices here. All right, next up we have Penelope Toothsome as well as her robot assistant Jock. And these two are from Twosome's Chocolate Emporium, the themed dining experience that you can find at City Walk at both Universal Florida and Universal Hollywood. These two are locks. I think I've heard very mixed things about the actual food at Twosome's. I've had decent experiences at Twosome's food-wise. I mean, it's nothing that's going to like blow you away. I basically describe Twosome's as essentially like a slightly more upscale version of the Cheesecake Factory. So, you're not going to get an amazing meal there, but you are going to get some pretty great character interactions. It's a great character dining establishment. The steampunk setting is fun. They do a lot of creative stuff with dessert. And I think Penelope Twosom and Jack are very interesting, very, very well-developed characters in their own right. And honestly, I feel like these two are kind of like the big reps when it comes to City Walk itself. And City Walk itself, I think, is a pretty big part of the Universal identity. All right, we're going to kind of speed run through a lot of these other ones because we don't really have a lot of original park characters left, so I'm just going to kind of justify these. The Grinch, I think you just got to have it because Grinchmas at Universal is super popular. Like lines that are hours long to meet the character, and you got to have that Dr. Seuss rep for Islands of Adventure. We have Dudley Do Right as well as Olive Oil for Toon Lagoon. For what to me, I would maybe probably just have Olive Oil and not Dudley, just because Dudley, like his whole character is kind of being a doofus in a lot of ways, so I don't really think you can have that much of a moveset for him. Olive Oil, on the other hand, I think what would be fun about her moveset would be essentially you would take that kind of like stretch and squash animation style, like her super cartoonishly long limbs and stuff like that, and apply it to a Smash moveset. I think that would be a lot of fun. And again, female rep is a little hard to come up with, so she felt like a pretty natural lock here. Marty McFly, I think, just gets on this roster for the legacy status of Back to the Future. As much as Marty McFly is an iconic Universal character, this wasn't my first pick just because the actual ride hasn't been around in so long. But if Starfall Racers, there is a rumor that Starfall Racers is going to be very vaguely connected to Back to the Future. I'm not going to spoil exactly how, just in case anyone's listening who doesn't want that spoiled for them. It's got something to do with the train itself. I will say that much. So if that's the case, then I think Marty McFly would make sense as like kind of like a backdoor Epic Universe rep. All right, next up we have maybe my favorite character in the whole roster when it comes to just stupid, silly inclusions. We got Jimmy Fallon, man. We got Jimmy. Give me Jimmy. I don't know, man. I don't think this is that realistic of a pig. I don't think the Jimmy Fallon attraction is going to be there much longer. But I just think having him here is just very silly and fun. And honestly, I think he is kind of like a blank slate of a character that you can do a lot with the moveset. It's dumb. It's totally dumb to have him here, but I think it's fun. All right, we have Woody Woodpecker. I think Woody Woodpecker does make a lot of sense because he is kind of like the one kind of like the mascot of Universal for a long time, at least before the Minions. And the Minions are also here kind of as filling in the Universal mascot role. So we have Woody and the Minions kind of filling in that sort of Toon mascot role. And I think both these inclusions make sense. I think the Minions could have a really fun moveset. I think Woody is just kind of like got that legacy factor. Of course, Woody Woodpecker also starred in the belovedly terrible Universal Studios game for Nintendo GameCube. Anyone remember that? One of my all-time favorite, like, so bad it's good video games. I love that game so much. It's terrible, but it's so nostalgic for me. All right, we have Beetlejuice and the Blues Brothers. I think makes sense just as far as like they are both very iconic as far as like streetmosphere and entertainment goes for Universal. I feel like having those walk around characters that also filled roles as far as full-blown productions and shows over the years, but you can also have them as walk around characters and meet and greets. I feel like they're both very versatile as far as being just a presence within the parks, and I feel like both of them earn their slot on the roster because of that. And then finally, we have two more Halloween Horror Nights icons. We have Lady Luck, who honestly I just kind of picked out of a hat as far as like coming up with a female rep for Halloween Horror Nights. I don't really know that much about her, but I think a casino-themed character could be fun, could lead to some fun movesets. And then you have the Pumpkin Lord. I encountered the Pumpkin Lord in my one and only Halloween Horror Nights experience, I believe back in 2022. The Pumpkin Lord is a trip, and I feel like he is just visually very intimidating. I feel like he's got a lot of connective tissue to other HHN characters, and he fills out the roster quite nicely. So yeah. All right, well, that is about it. I feel like I could go in and explain some more of the items and some of the tag team mechanics, but I don't really think any of y'all would be that interested in it. It's a lot of deep cuts. Okay, we have Code Gios in the chat here. Code Gios, I'm just I announced at the top here, but since you're here, in case you missed it, this week is going to be a little bit light on content on the channel because we are currently sort of in between projects right now. I'm kind of in the middle of trying to cram in all the movies for the Great Disney Tunes Ranking podcast, which we will be starting in early September, probably around Labor Day. Little Blue, or Eli from Little Blue Productions, and we are going to be doing a Tim Burton ranking at the end of this week, and that should be fun. Of course, Dragon and Jacob will be doing the Phineas and Ferb Recapinator on Friday. Other than that, I think it's going to be pretty much a blank week for us. I've got to cram like 20 issues of a comic for the Batcave that we're doing, and that is definitely not going to be this week. We definitely want to try and do a debate next week, but I need to round up some people for that, and that's going to take some time. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a production hiatus here on the channel. We should hopefully be back in full working order next week, and make no mistake, between the great ranking podcast coming up for Burden and Disney Tunes, as well as our usual big slate for Halloween for Haunted Holiday Hijinks, the next couple months will be very busy for us, but this is just kind of going to be probably one of the least active weeks of the year for us on the channel. So yeah. All right. Well, that'll be it, folks. I just thought I'd take the time to go through this roster because, frankly, I'm really proud of it. And I think our team did a really good job of creating everything. The link is in the description. If you want to read more about this project, you can read more of the movesets. Check out the story mode that gets very elaborated on. Pi did all the story mode stuff. Check out my item system, including a ticket book where characters have access to various A, C, and E ticket attractions that essentially act as events within the fight. Yeah, a lot of stuff there. So that's about it. I just wanted to come on, do the solo stream, and like I said, just give you guys a little bit of an update as to why we're not going to have a lot of content this week. But we will be back soon, stronger than ever. So just stay tuned for that. All right. Have a good night, everyone. See y'all later.